Hi everyone, this is D Keys bringing you an Elementalist's guide to the Urban Battleground Fractal. In this first room, we have an epic battle raging between the Ascalonians and the Charr. However, you can avoid this combat by just sticking to the left wall and making your way around the room. If you are still waiting for party mates to catch up, you can equip a staff and take out an arrow cart that will be firing upon your first battle site. Dagger Focus, Scepter Dagger, and Scepter Focus are all reasonable weapon choices for this fractal, as you'll supplement its DPS with Lightning Hammer so that you can keep groups of enemies blinded while in combat. You'll also want to use Glyph of Storms for additional blinds. When entering combat, you'll want to stack Might if you haven't pre-stacked, and then once you hit Earth Attunement, use Glyph of Storms on the largest group of mobs nearby. That way you and your party mates can safely DPS. Once you reach the first gate, work on taking out the pots of burning oil using ranged attacks. If you have room on your utility bar, you could take Frostbow to quickly get rid of them, or if you can get out of combat for more than a few seconds, you can swap to staff for this. If not, a Scepter auto attack will work nicely. Once the pots have been destroyed, you can go ahead and engage Delphi. Ignore the ballistas and arrow carts, as Delphi will just respawn those while she's still alive. In the next room, you'll be able to take a path to get to the final room that has several groups of vets along the way. I prefer the left path because that one is usually one of the easiest. If that's not open, one of the center paths is shorter but often has harder groups of mobs, and the right path is the longest. When engaging a group of enemies, you'll want to LOS around rubble, have a guardian pull, if you have one in your group, and let the NPCs draw aggro as you put up reflects and stack might with your group. While stacking might, use Glyph of Storms and Earth Attunement to blind your enemies, and then when you're done stacking might, cast Lightning Hammer to continue DPSing and keep up those blinds. You'll notice that my party mates and I are using Scale Venom instead of Sharpening Stones or Maintenance Oils. This is so that we can apply weakness to the enemies so that they don't hit as hard. Ever since the Fractured update, the NPCs have made it a little bit more difficult to LOS cleanly. A Guardian can put up a line of warding or ring of warding so that you can safely stack might, but then as you're going into battle, you'll want warriors to use knockdowns, and guardians and mesmers to use pulls to keep these mobs disabled. If using a scepter, you can use Blinding Flash and Dust Devil to keep blinds up on your enemies while other skills are on cooldown. If you are using an offhand focus, you can also use Swirling Winds while in Air Attunement, in addition to your party's other reflects, in order to help keep them safe from archers and monks. Your elite choice for this first part of the fractal is entirely up to you. You could use a Glyph of Elementals to add to DPS by casting it in Fire or Air Attunement, or if you do manage to get a clean LOS, you could use Fiery Rush on a Fiery Greatsword. You'll want to be especially careful when fighting groups of mages and warriors, as their attacks can one-shot you very easily, especially at the higher level fractals. Again, you'll want to stack might very quickly so that you can get into Earth Attunement to put down a Glyph of Storms to keep everyone blinded. You'll want to stay away from the warriors as their rush can just one-shot you. And you'll want to be careful where you're standing when there are mages around because their AoEs can also hurt you quite a bit. Again, as you see us engage this last group of enemies, we keep them disabled with knockdowns, reflects, and blinds so that we can safely DPS them down. In this last room of the fractal, you'll want to engage one group of enemies at a time so that you don't take on too much at once. This has become especially difficult since the Fractured update because the NPCs like to rush in as soon as someone draws aggro. What we do to get around this is have anyone who happens to have NPCs with them stand outside the room or upstairs while someone without NPCs pulls enemies. For this first group of mobs, we stand outside the door, and as the NPCs aggro, we stack might. We want to get blinds on those enemies as soon as possible so that the NPCs and your allies stay alive. As you start killing them, you can push in a little bit, but be very careful of where you're standing and how close you're standing to warriors. You'll always want to make sure you have reflects up as well to help disable monks, mages, and archers that may be nearby. As soon as you are done fighting a group, pull out of the room so that your NPCs aren't hit with a ballista, and go to the center of the room. Because once they're hit by the ballista, they aggro on it and then will go in to destroy it, thus pulling all the groups of mobs together and making your job much more difficult. If the NPCs are too close, as someone draws aggro from a group of mobs, then they will usually rush in. If that's the case, follow after them and try to stack might and blind as much as possible so that you can quickly get rid of the enemies. Once the enemies are dead, you'll want to rush out of the room as quickly as possible. That way, when the NPCs run in to clear the ballista that has been hitting them, they will instead teleport back to you because they have leashed. Once the first couple groups of enemies near the door have been cleared, you can use the wall and the area outside of the red circle to proceed around the room to clear out other enemies. You'll want to hold the NPCs at the top of the stairs as your party mates draw the enemies. If you happen to have no NPCs on you and are responsible for drawing enemies, you'll want to probably equip a focus so that you can use obsidian flesh, and use arcane blast for a long-range pull. You'll also want to use swirling winds, just in case you happen to have an archer or a mage shoot a projectile at you while you're running away. Again, once you are done engaging a group of enemies, you'll want to run up the stairs again, so that instead of rushing in, the NPCs will teleport to you at the top of the stairs. On the northern side of the room, it is not safe to LOS on the stairs because there are enemies at the top. Instead, we'll use a statue to LOS and be safe from the ballista as we are first pulling the mobs and stacking might. You'll want to chain reflects as these groups usually have monks and archers, in addition to a few warriors that you'll want to blind. Once all the enemies have been defeated, be careful as you take out the arrow carts and the ballista, as the arrow carts will take off a decent chunk of your HP and are very hard to dodge. As the next event starts, you'll want to swap off of your stacking weapons and onto force and accuracy weapons, as this is a daytime fractal. The last few groups of enemies that you'll encounter don't give you stacks. While the Fractured update made the NPCs much more aggressive, it also gave them immunity to agony damage. This makes the last fight with Captain Asham a lot easier, as not only will the NPCs immediately aggro onto him, they also won't die when he uses his agony attack in Phase 2. For Captain Asham, you'll want your utilities to be DPS oriented, such as Signet of Fire, Arcane Wave, Lightning Hammer if that's suitable for your build, or Glyph of Storms, or even Frostbow so that you can disable him and then use Frostbow 4. For your elite, you could also use a Fiery Greatsword and take Lightning Flash. I also use Glyph of Elementals here, and cast it in Air Attunement so that I have a little bit more DPS. As Asham is entering the room, put up a fire field so that you and your allies can stack might. This battle typically goes very quickly ever since the Fractured patch because the NPCs do a hefty amount of damage. In Phase 1, stay at his back, and if possible, at 300 range so that you aren't hit by his sword cleave, and if he is blocking, back off so that you don't apply burning to yourself. In Phase 2, use swirling winds to protect your party from fireballs, and watch out for meteor shower and flame wall. If he enters Phase 3, use obsidian flesh if you have an offhand focus to protect yourself from the fiery greatsword attacks that he will be doing. And that's it for the Urban Battleground Fractal. Thanks for watching.